You've just met someone. They smile, extend their hand, and tell you their name. You smile back. You shake their hand. You even repeat their name in your head. And then, 30 seconds later, it's gone. Completely gone. Like it never existed. You stand there, nodding along to the conversation, silently panicking because you have no idea what to call this person anymore. If this sounds painfully familiar, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not broken. There's actual psychology behind why some people forget names instantly, while others seem to remember everyone they've ever met. And what it says about you might actually surprise you. Let's be honest. Forgetting someone's name feels embarrassing. You worry they'll think you don't care, that you weren't paying attention, that you're rude or disinterested. But here's what's really happening in your brain during that introduction. While they're saying their name, your mind is juggling a dozen other things. You're reading their facial expression, analyzing their tone, trying to figure out if they're friendly or formal, wondering if your handshake was too firm or too weak. Maybe even noticing that they have the same jacket as your cousin. Your brain is taking in everything, except, ironically, the one piece of information you actually need. And this isn't a flaw. It's actually a sign of something much deeper. Memory isn't just one single system. Your brain has different processes for different types of information. And names are processed in one of the trickiest parts of human memory. There's a phenomenon in psychology called the Baker-Baker paradox. Here's how it works. If I tell you, this person is a baker, you'll probably remember that. But if I tell you, this person's name is Baker, you're much more likely to forget it. It's the same word, the same sound, but your brain treats them completely differently. Why? Because a baker connects to images. The smell of bread, an oven, flour on an apron. Your brain has dozens of mental hooks to hang that memory on. But baker, as a name, is just a label. It doesn't automatically connect to anything. It's abstract. And abstract information is the hardest thing for the human brain to hold on to. Now here's where it gets interesting. People who forget names easily usually fall into a few patterns. First, you might be a deep processor. While everyone else is casually collecting names like trading cards, your brain is doing something different. You're reading between the lines. You're noticing body language. You're picking up on energy. You're sensing whether someone is genuine or putting on a show. You may forget what someone is called, but you remember how they made you feel. And that's not a weakness, that's emotional intelligence. Second, you might be present-focused. You're not busy planning what you'll say next. You're not rehearsing your response while they're talking. You're actually listening. Most people don't forget names because they're bad listeners. They forget because their attention is spread across everything happening in the moment. Tone, emotion, context, environment. The name is just one tiny piece of data in a flood of information. Third, you may simply be someone who remembers experiences more than labels. Think about it. Do you remember moments, or do you remember names? Do you remember the deep conversation you had at that party, or do you remember what everyone was called? Do you remember how that trip felt, or do you remember the name of every town you passed through? People who forget names often have excellent memory for stories, emotions, and details. They just organize information differently. There's also a neurological reason behind this. When you meet someone, your hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for forming new memories, lights up. But it doesn't treat all information equally. It prioritizes what feels emotionally significant or relevant. A name, by itself, usually has neither emotional weight nor survival importance. So unless that name connects to something meaningful, a shared interest, a funny moment, a unique detail, your brain quietly labels it as low priority. This is why you can forget someone's name but clearly remember that they love hiking, that they laughed at your joke, or that they seemed a little nervous. Your brain is wired for connection, not cataloging. So if you're someone who forgets names easily, here's a different way to see it. You're not careless, you're selective. Your brain prioritizes depth over data. You care more about understanding people than labeling them. And in a world where everyone seems to skim the surface, that's actually a rare and valuable quality. Think about the names that do stick in your memory. They're usually not random acquaintances. They're people who made an impact. People you had a meaningful conversation with. People who shared something real. Your brain doesn't just remember names. It remembers significance. And here's something nobody says enough. It's okay to forget. It's okay to ask again. Most people are far more understanding than you think. In fact, they're often relieved when you admit you forgot, because there's a good chance they forgot your name too. There's something refreshingly human about saying, "I'm so sorry, I'm terrible with names, but I remember you told me about your trip to the mountains." That honesty and vulnerability often create more connection than pretending you remember ever could. If you do want to get better at remembering names, the key isn't forcing yourself to memorize them. The key is attaching the name to meaning. Don't try to remember the name in isolation. Try to remember the person. Ask a follow-up question. Notice a detail. Create a mental link. Sarah, like my sister's name. James, you're the one who's into photography, right? Give your brain something to connect to. Once there's context, the name becomes easier to store. Your brain doesn't fail at names because it's broken. It struggles because it's waiting for significance. And once you give it that, the name has somewhere to stick. So if you've spent years feeling embarrassed about this, hear this clearly. You're not scattered. You're not rude. You're not a bad listener. You're just wired to remember what feels meaningful. In a world full of people collecting names like trophies, there's something beautiful about being someone who remembers hearts instead. The next time you forget someone's name, don't panic. Smile. Ask again. You might not recall what they're called, but chances are, you'll remember how they made you feel. And that kind of memory is the one that truly matters. If this resonated with you, share your experience. Are you someone who forgets names but remembers everything else? I'd love to hear your story.